Welcome to the Sixcast, a podcast where we discuss real-world strategies, tips, and stories that provide helpful insights for your digital transformation experience.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Sixcast with Anesu Machoko. He is the CEO of MetaDigital Tech. And in part one, we're going to be talking about quitting his job, getting funding for his product in San Francisco, and how he launched his company. Hi, all. Glad to be back with another episode of Sixcast, the hustle and thrive in the six. My name is Kithmini Palihapatia. I'm the Director of Communications and Strategy of Six Senses. I also have Warna Kaluwansha, the CEO of Six Senses. Our guest for today is Anesu Machoko, the CEO and co-founder of MetaDigital, a payment verification solutions for healthcare claims. Welcome to the show, Anesu.
Hi, nice to see you, and nice to see Waruna. We've been friends for a while since we met in our Schulich days, and kept in touch over the years. And it's nice to be a guest today.
Thank you, Anesu. Welcome again. Glad to have you on the show.
Yes.
Let me tell a bit about how I met Anesu. I met Anesu at Schulich School of Business during my MBA times. I saw him as someone who always asked thought-provoking, out-of-the-box questions over the time. And while I was there pretty much to absorb things the best I could, I felt like Anesu's style was challenging and learning through being inquisitive and conversation. And that's the way I perceived Anesu. Anesu, just to know, without further delay, why don't we dive right into some of the interesting questions and conversation that we were planning to have today. Anesu, tell me a bit about yourself, who you are, and how's your life journey has been so far.
Oh, who I am. This is an interesting question. I always like, depending on your audience, they might, if they were trying to hire me, they might be, this is too long of an answer. So I was born in Zimbabwe, about 32 years ago. We lived, my parents were middle class. My dad, a university professor, my mom, a teacher. My dad was also a priest, so kind of dual jobs there. Went to a boarding high school, pretty strict parents. Education was always interesting. Although I was a good athlete, I will tell you that, and I still keep that reputation. And we have to keep that going, even on this podcast, right? So, good athlete. Let's keep that going. So,
right.
At some point, my parents moved to England, and then stayed there for a couple of years, and then came here to Canada when I was 14. So this was quite a challenge, right? Because as a kid, you make friends, and your early friends are your best friends, and then your parents say, "Hey, we're going to another new continent," and you're like, "What happened?" Right? You go there, you live for a couple of years, and you start developing new friendships. My dad says, "We're going to Canada." So I came here, and I went to do my undergrad in Manitoba. So I did my undergrad in actuarial mathematics, and somehow I couldn't get a job in Winnipeg. It was interesting. And this is a funny story. I did not know how to actually write a resume. If you saw my resume that I had coming out of, one of my friends told me that he would never hire me, because I had no experience in these things. When I came here as an immigrant, all my jobs were like, hey, you're working as, night guard or whatever. Right? So I could imagine how my resume was interesting. There's a story to this. Trust me, it will all come around to where I am right now. And I couldn't get a job. And I remember walking around to all the insurance companies, because at the time we had one desktop. So, it's not like you can throw 1,000 resumes a day. So, I didn't know how to apply online. And if you remember, probably this is not too far ago, this is the mid-2010s, the newspapers had classified ads where you would actually look in the classified ads of the newspaper to find jobs and then apply for them. It sounds like a different world, but that's what was happening. Couldn't get a job there, tried my best, but then I learned how to knock on people's doors, right? Because that taught me, I gotta go out and really try to make something of myself. Um, Fast forward, I get a job in Ottawa, working for the government of Canada. So I go and I live in Gatineau, and I'm working with debt capital markets, EDC. It's exciting, and Gatineau is cheap places. Has anyone been to Gatineau here? It's like super cheap, cheap places. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I loved living in Gatineau because it was cheap and the drinks were cheap too. However, however, it was, you know, I spent 2 hours going to work from Gatineau to Ottawa, and anyone who knows Ottawa, it's such a city that everyone comes to town to work, and everyone leaves at the same time. So think about the bottleneck going out of the town. It takes 3 hours to do a 20-kilometer ride, right? So I wasn't feeling it at all. It was nice to work, but it was not quite a good living environment. I decided to come to Toronto, and um, I said to myself, look, I want to do an MBA. I have to go to Winnipeg. At the time, I was with a girl that was in Winnipeg, so that kind of made sense, right? To kind of like, I'm trying to do some things. So I kind of like felt like, okay, this is good. I can go to Winnipeg. I can really, build my dating career there, and everything will work out. So as I was living with this church, this priest that had helped me, so the church has been very important in my life. My I applied for a job at MCAN Mortgage Corporation, and in my applications prior to that, again, when I would send a resume, I would send the resume even to the CEO. If I edit the CEO on LinkedIn, I'm like, hey, there's a job in your company. I'm the best person to do that job. Here's a resume. So knocking on doors became very familiar to me. So yeah, if someone says we want to have a speaker, let's just talk to them. Yeah, let's call them and talk to them. Because, I didn't have any fear. What did I have to lose, right? I have no job, and I'm trying to do something. So I get this interview at MCON, and I'm not feeling it. I'm like, MBA, MBA. I've convinced my parents that I could be unemployed and it's good for everyone, when they go to school. Um, and so I go into this interview and I meet a guy called Bill Gendrasis. And the first day I ever meet him, he asks me, what are your plans? And I say, look, I think I'm the best person to do a job. I'm an actuary. I've done an FRIM. I'm doing my CFA. I can do the job very well. However, I would want, if I'm doing your job, I can tell you that I can work 12 hours a day or 15 hours, whatever hours you want, Monday to Thursday, as long as I get Fridays every 2 weeks to go and do my MBA at the University of Manitoba. This was the first meeting I've ever had with this guy. And he said to me, I'll pay for your MBA. And I know people at Schulich. I'm going to actually do the application for you. So this is now me coming on the first day of the job, and I've been given an $80,000 salary, and the guy has offered to pay for my MBA. Yeah, and that just taught me a lot about being bold and just going for it, right? Like fortune always favors the bold. If you don't go for it, that guy would have never known my ambition to want to do an MBA. So he did well, introduced me to the MBA. That's when I went and I did my MBA and master's in financial engineering. The boss who was I was working for loved him. Your first boss who hires you, gives you an MBA, you take your shirt for him. Like I felt like a kinship to him. They move him to go to become the chairman of the board because his dad owns the company, and they put in this guy who was the CRO. I won't go into his name because I like him personally, but he was incompetent. It was sort of like, I know my friend from MBA and I have a company. I'll just plug him in finance because he's a friend of mine, right? And then he knows nothing about finance. I quit my job and then I went to work for a VC in London called Outlier Ventures. That's where we started learning about blockchain and AI. This was interesting because now I was on the other side of the table dealing with entrepreneurs. Then we came across with what was called sovereign identity, which is this digital identity protocol that we are working on. And we figured out that I could try to start a company because people wanted to authenticate the identity of people. So, we started the company, and there's an interesting story around it because it started as a dating company, a dating app, because all the girls said guys lie and whatnot. and I sent the proposal to every professor that taught me at Schulich. Every professor sent him the proposal. And I went and met them, and up to a T, all of them told me it was a bad idea. When they're like, you're not going to make money. So I meet this guy, L, who is a Schulich alumni, at this coffee shop. And I'm like, look, I've built this business model. I'm trying to get something interesting. I know I've good technology, but I just need a good use case. And then he looks at me and he says, why don't you think about healthcare? And I go, ah. So me and my co-founder going to write two proposals again. I would do research on healthcare. You do digital identity on employment, right? People want to verify credentials for employment, or you want to verify claims for healthcare. It turns out after we did surveys, met about 300 doctors, 500 pharmacies in a period of like a month and a half. We knew we had a real problem that we could solve here, and we'll go into how the solution iterated. And I was fortunate enough to get some funding to go to San Francisco, where we went and we developed our product. So at least that's where I am now. There are more questions, but now you know where I came and how I got here.
Yeah, thank you, Anesu. I think you covered some of the other related questions as well. I want to ask this particular question that always, sometimes, my friends would ask me. You seem to have a successful career. Seem to be on the right path. Actuaries, they do well. They work long hours. They get paid well. What you wanted to change your careers to become an entrepreneur, take a risk? Were you not scared? Were you not concerned about your future? Leaving a job and leaving all that learning, especially in the actuarial science. I know you have to go through a lot of certifications and a lot of exams. Do they not expire? And were you not concerned
Oh, I
overall?
hated being an actuary. Hated it. It was terrible. I liked the idea of writing exams and maybe impressing the people in my department, maybe the occasional girl that you meet at a bar who knows what an actuary does. But it was awful. I didn't like it. It's one of those things where you go to school on the myth of the program, and then actually the job is you're stuck in a room working with numbers. There's no innovation. It was just it wasn't for me, and the salary itself was sort of like designed in such a way that it didn't actually align with any of the company programs. It's a good career. It taught me a lot. So the one thing that I would say about being an actuary is that when you are doing the program, right, you are literally doing statistics in one track, you're doing mathematics in another track, and you're doing finance in another track. So basically, you're the equivalent of someone who's doing three majors at once, right? And you're doing statistics as well, right? So you have with a broad skill set. So it allowed me, as soon as I couldn't find a job in Winnipeg, I just went like, what am I doing with my life? I've got all this base of knowledge, and why am I just constricting myself to working for insurance companies? So that, making that decision immediately made me feel like, eventually the education is just an entry level thing that you have, or your MBA. Everything in life is based on your relationships, your ability, your desire, and your ability to learn, right? And to take chances. So, I I usually joke with my friends that I'm a retired actuary. I don't know. Do you have the same experience where, like, a lot of MBA, you remember in class where we would have teachers say, we think everyone is trying to restructure their career, kind of thing, and I
Yeah,
just I think most people in the MBA that same feeling that the way they thought their program was designed coming out of school, the way their parents had told them, going to finance, going to marketing, going to all of this, they go into it thinking, oh my God, and they see a total different experience from what their parents told them,
yeah,
what they learned in school, and what they're
yeah.
experiencing in the workforce.
I just wanted to ask you, Anesu, so what you're saying, it resonates with so many people because everybody gets into a career and they're thinking, oh, this is going to be the best thing ever. And then they take a step back and they're like, wait, maybe this isn't, maybe I need a realignment, I need to refresh. But where did you get your risk taking abilities from? Because starting a business takes a lot of risk. And obviously, you need to be a little bit more bold and you need to be a little bit more, thinking in terms of like opportunities and not the status quo. So what developed those skills
Oh,
for
so
you?
for the company, it was interesting because if you take chances once and you become successful, you start believing you can repeat that success time and time and time again, right? So a guy like me who came here who didn't have a resume, who was struggling living in people's houses, you know, I like to feel like I'm a self-made guy, right? I go around, I've got help from people from church, but I didn't have like, I didn't know the mayor's cousin, right? To kind of like get along the ladder, or my dad did not buy me a car at 16 years old. So everything you have is you have to kind of like crawl. And also having seen my parents, right? My parents came from like rural areas, right? And now they live in a first world country. That is a testament of like, you can come from a place where up to this day they don't have electricity at all, right? And now you are in, you know, according to the recent polls, the best country in the world, right? That are being rated. So that experience, seeing it manifest, and also, taking a chance, living Winnipeg was a big chance, right? Taking a chance, living Ottawa and going to Toronto to do an MBA where I had no MBA and I didn't have a job. And then a few months later, I have an MBA and I've got someone paying for my MBA and I have a job. Taking a chance, working for a VC and investing and seeing things grow. Starting a company and never giving up, but also doing it prudently, right? Understanding what's happening, iterating your solution. So I think what I could tell some of your audience here is, it's, you know, usually these are skills that you develop over time. You think about the times when you had to take chances in your life and really tie those things to how your success is going. And that confidence will give you even much better confidence to say, hey, I don't have a customer, I've got 2 meetings, I don't know how my company is going to work out, but I think I'll have a deal next week, right? And that mentality is what makes, I think that's what I think about trying to be a successful business guy and also just trying to do well, in life.
Now I have a somewhat similar story like you, Anesu. My parents, my father was a principal. My mother, they wanted me to pursue my academics and be, just to be an engineer. It's just very cliche, very natural for parents of our nature, just to be an engineer, a doctor, a lawyer, like those, cliche jobs, and they never would have thought of going into app space. So at the time there was not a technology was not abandoned, so abandoned at the time, and they were like very pushy about, okay, go to school, do well, don't focus too much about sports or
Do you know the interesting thing is that if you actually ask your parents, or if when I asked my parents when they were pushing me to do anything, they have no actual idea about how that career
right,
actually operates. But it's just good to say, hey, my son is an engineer, my son is an
right.
actuary, and it's hilarious when you're like looking for a job and you're like, can you help me through the interviews? They're like, yeah, you're on your own there.
Yeah, my father was as well. He was, okay, go to school, do your thing, and do your masters, do your PhD, and go that route. At the same time, you have a business on the side, like
Yeah.
on the side thing. That's always the catchphrase. Do a business on the
I
side.
don't know if you can do that though. I don't know if you can do. I think that's it. If you really want to do something, especially like a business, I just always say like if you are working another job, you have a
Yeah,
hobby.
yeah,
That's a hobby. If you really want to be great, you have to. It takes
right.
sacrifice. Yeah. I always tell my friends that I don't take vacations as much, not because I'm busy, but also because I don't have the money to throw out on vacations when you are starting to build a company. You know, so I don't know. That's an interesting
Yeah.
point that you brought up. Continue,
Um,
please.
So Anesu, can you tell us about your company and exactly what exactly were your driving forces to create this, and what is your impact, and how did you want to help society with your solutions?
So we want to help. Healthcare is a very big expense. If you think of your budget, almost 15% of our budget is going to healthcare. Who knows what's going to happen after the pandemic? Today we read that about 16 million procedures are in the pipeline. So all of those are going to come in a significant cost. So I wouldn't be surprised if healthcare costs go up very high. So in general, from a macro perspective, how do we help the public? We want to help the public, employers and payers, save a lot of money. Through there's a lot of fraud in the system. So much of the fraud happens. It's estimated to be between 3 to 10%. When you actually dig a little bit deeper into it, it's usually higher, probably 17, 18%. And it's an interesting. This is a new secret. So for all the people that are here, nobody actually catches fraud in healthcare. And again, go into deeper details about that because we have been working on this problem for the last 2 years. But as you go to an employer, everyone insurance company tells you we are trying to protect your money from fraud. So it turns out that the majority of the fraud that happens through providers. All right, so these are your pharmacist, your doctor. Now, less here in Canada because we have a much centralized medical system. The doctor is paid a fixed fee. So the incentive of a doctor sending 200 extra claims is not there because their salary doesn't really change based on how much volume of business they generate. So it's mainly the pharmacist here, for example, who is actually incentivized to actually commit a crime and commit fraud. So in my book, I don't look at pharmacists as benevolent people that really want to help us with medication. I look at them and say, this is a guy whose job is to sell as many prescriptions as possible. And do you know why? In a pharmacist prescription, there's what is called a dispensing fee, right? That is a fixed fee that a pharmacist gets on every claim. So if you knew you could get $10 flat fee on every claim you had, you want to maximize that, right? So that gives incentives for fraud. So we discovered that there was a lot of fraud that was being passed on. And the way in which companies that tend to monitor this is that they are only focused on high dollar claim values. So these are, if you are looking at the US, you're looking at anything above 100,000 and stuff like that. And they don't even look at anything below that. And then what it does is that it creates an incentive where you have a highly inefficient system where everyone is telling you we are monitoring fraud, but actually a lot of fraud is actually going through. And every once in a while, when you catch a provider, you hear that a company lost 200 million in about 6 months in fraud. And they're like, how does that happen?
Right.
Because nobody's checking. So what they do currently is that they focus on high value claims. So these are specialty drugs, cocktails of amino acids in vaccines, whatever you want to have. Those are the expensive drugs. And what they do is that they only look at a sample size of them. So your average insurance company like Manulife is a special investigation unit that is like 20 people. And yet they've got over 11 million members on their platform, on their books. Every member generates 10 claims. So now they have 110 million claims that they have to look at. Do you think 20 people are reviewing that claims business? No, they are not. So what we are doing is we are using a solution which, one, we are using member engagement. So every time when a member gets a claim, be it medical, especially in the US with our clients, I'll go into that. But in Canada, for example, we're dealing with a pilot that we're about to launch with Green Shield Canada, right? And let's say Green Shield is an employer, right? Every time when a claim now goes, we will go in and we'll contact the member if we have a variety of reasons to think that claim is fraudulent. So we track what is called a member score. So this means what is the frequency of this member using, sending the claims. If we see unusual patterns where their refill is a bit earlier than not, then they are, are they committing fraud? We look at claim score, right? So if there's overpayment or overbilling, so why is this provider, billing for this procedure 200% than the peers in their area, right? Something is wrong there. So we have an AI machine algorithm that we've built that curates all the claims because we don't want to send messages to 111 million people at times, right? We only want to send messages to those claims we think are fraudulent. So it allows us now to send the message, the member responds. As soon as the member responds, there's a live dashboard that updates immediately. And then as soon as that happens, the payer can suspend payment before money goes out. Currently, the way fraud happens is that the money goes out to the doctor, and then 3 months later, we discover
Yeah.
it's fraud. Good luck getting that money.
Right.
Think about the legal cost. So that's the problem in a nutshell that we are solving with AI in automating all that process to make it easier for payers to be able to get massive savings
Yeah.
from the benefits that can be passed on to employers.
So it sounds like there's a more immediacy and you're reducing the time, right, to be able to flag these things.
Yes, so so basically we're going into the prepayment. So if you think about the claim cycle, when you go to the pharmacist, the claim goes from the pharmacist and it goes to what is called a third-party administrator or a pharmacy benefit manager. That's a PBM. A lot of people don't know PBMs because they work out in the shadows. So basically, if you look at your Manulife card, at the back of it, you'll find something like Express Scripts, right? That's a PBM, right? So basically, they're a pharmacy benefit manager. They do the adjudication. They check for errors. They check for, kind of like mistakes. To make sure that everything's so. They also check for coverage, right? So they want to make sure that the coverage that is being, the medication that is being offered fits the coverage there. And then from there, if it's okay, they now pay the pharmacist 2 weeks, and then they send the claim to the insurance company,
Got it.
right? And then when there is fraud, the insurance company might hire another third-party company to now go and review all those claims.
Right.
So think about now the pharmacist has already been paid. In our solution, we can now integrate just after the pharmacist sends the claim. So as soon as the claim gets to the PBM, to the third-party administrator, that's where we insert ourselves with an API, and then we get the pharmacist, as soon as he's getting the message back, we are notifying the member immediately. Hey, we got a claim here. Did you participate? Right? This is the dollar value. This is something, and all of that stuff. And then it
It's
allows us
a
to, yeah,
verification process, right? It's like a verification. Yeah.
yes. So
Okay.
now we are verifying claims, and instead of verifying people's, age and names on a dating app. So you see how the business evolved. So that's what we're doing.
That's very interesting. And what an amazing impact. Like ultimately, I didn't know any of those statistics previously, so that's quite impressive.
It's interesting how we fell into this, because once we decided to look into healthcare, the immediate thing that we went into was like, how much is healthcare fraud, right? And I'd never thought about this, and I was fortunate enough to read a story about a company that is we're going to be presenting on the 29th to the CEO, the chief financial officer, the chief medical officer. We think we'll get an approval for a pilot where we might, the savings that we are looking for that company could be upwards of $400 million if fully, with a full adoption. And that this case, LifeBright, Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina, that this case in 2018 called LifeBright, where one of their community hospitals defrauded them over a 9-month period for $80 million. Basically, they sent 600 million claims that were fraudulent, and the average claim value was $125.
Wow.
So no one was looking at these claims, right? And that passed through. So as soon as we saw that, we were like, okay, this is something. And then we started researching about pharmacy fraud. I went into looking at some of the disciplinary records. So one of the things that in my mind, if an entrepreneur is trying to really start a company and really want to think through, do your homework. Because as soon as you meet your client,
Yeah.
they know more than, they know the problem. They know why certain things happen in that direction, and they know where the bodies are buried. And really going out and talking to doctors and pharmacists and mercurial background, thank God, that's when it only helped, right? In most cases, it was, it is what has set us up to try and continually improve and get the right people. Because we knew initially that when we talked to the doctors, to the pharmacists, to the stakeholders, there was a problem, and we solved.
Now, that goes into the next question. Kind of connects to the next question. It looks like your business is going to be pretty big sooner or later, because the way the potential of the market, there is a market need, there is a problem that you're trying to solve. It looks like it's there has a huge potential.
It's promising. It's
It's
promising. It's
promising.
promising. So right now we have a bigger pipeline, but you have to always focus on a number of when you're trying to close a sales pipeline, and I think you know
Right.
this, it's difficult to close a sales pipeline with 11 leads at the same
Right.
time, right? You
Right.
have to have one or two clients that are going to become very important,
Right.
and they become, your clients that help you take your product to the next level.
Right, 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 and
So currently we're working
that's
with
the way I designed my business as well. I had a couple of clients, not many clients, couple of clients had gone very deep into their business, and they were pretty
yes.
much paying my bills. They were pretty much paying the sustainability of the company, and there is a huge benefit to that because you are not spending too much money in marketing. You're not lower turnover, employee turnover, better satisfaction. It's easy to work with. It's not too stressful when you spread spread your business across multiple clients. It becomes hard to manage.
So for us, one of our clients are very big, right? Green Shield, Manulife, so good luck trying to sell something into a company that is 5,000
Right,
people and, politics and stuff
right,
like that. So it has been very, very difficult. So I've talked to almost every insurance company in the country and in
right,
North America.
right,
And, and sometimes we call like places where ideas go to die is companies,
right.
right? Because
Mhm.
think about it, if I go in and I tell someone in the claims department you have a problem, their director, they've got their job, they have to go through so many people to get money. So it became better for us to focus on Blue Cross and on Green Shield once we found people that were really interested in what we're doing,
Mhm,
right? They were willing to give us a timeline, contact me on this timeline. They were not giving you vague timelines like let's just talk sometime in
mhm,
2022, right?
mhm,
It's like, hey, I really want to get through this. Let's talk on January 31st, and they sent you, and this is what I want to do. So we found that with a wonderful man called Rob Gofford, that is the VP of Operations in with Blue Cross,
mhm,
and at Green Shield there's an MBA Shule graduate called Audi Maduro, who is their director of operations, who has been really helpful, and not just that they helped us in helping create buy-in inside the organization, but it also improving our product,
mhm,
right? Because as soon as we were trying to say, hey, okay, this is how we want to do a pilot, this is how we think this department will interact with that department, they'll be like, okay, no, you know what? We are worried that you might contact too many members and our customer service team cannot deal with this. Can you solve this if you want to go ahead? So now, much of our work is, okay, this is a problem. How do we go and engineer our product to make it even better? And I think it's much easier if you have one or two clients because you can really focus on making the product the best
mhm,
product instead of having 15 clients that you're trying to sell one product at the same time. I think when you want to have 15 clients, you want to have at least a gold standard of a product
That's
where
right.
you don't have to customize it for all the
mhm,
clients, right? Because if you're customizing for all the clients, you don't have a product,
mhm, mhm.
right?
Yeah, so it sounds like you're systematizing things, right? So they
Yeah.
become like a system, and then there's more replication from that model, and you can use that model going forward, and you can start to have growth from there.
Yes. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I think it's an interesting process. So we are working with them. So the way we are structuring this joint presentation with Rob to his team is we set like 3 meetings, 3-hour meetings. So this allows us to align with him to create that buy-in. So when we go and sit on the table, this is what we learn from MBAs and reading books and whatnot. Education is such an important thing, and I learned this from talking to him and talking to a lot of other people who are running other people. You're trying to create. Remember the negotiating class that I forget the professor where he was talking about creating win-win situations, right? You always say win-win situations in class. If I get the name, I'll remember it. But it was an interesting guy. And here the idea is if we have Rob on our team and we are talking, right? It doesn't seem like in that meeting it's us on one table and them on another table, right?
Right,
It's one of their colleagues and us working as a team to try and solve a project. So that's why we're designing this,
right.
and that's going to work, and we believe it will work. The other deal that we are looking at is with a company called Blue Cross Massachusetts,
Mhm,
$17 billion in revenue. They're trying to open a new sort of like an incubator where they have 5 companies that can work with their department heads and then try to solve some of the problems. So I will be able to know sometime hopefully in July how everything works. And if that works, then who knows, by the end of the year, maybe around September, I might be in Boston.
Thank you, everyone, for listening to the episode 2 of Sixcast. And that was Anesu Machoko, the CEO of MetaDigital. And he was talking about quitting his job, getting funding for his product in San Francisco, and just explaining his journey and his background with Varna Kalawancha and Kismini Palihapatia.